Hey guys, tonight we're going back, way back, to a land where gods turn into birds, cows cry real tears, and reality is only vaguely respected. Imagine a golden orchard that glows faintly in the starlight. The trees shimmer like metal, but they're real, and one apple in particular has a name carved into it: To the Fairest. Sounds innocent enough, right? Except this golden fruit is about to cause a massive, legendary war, and honestly, you probably won't survive this myth without raising one eyebrow. Or both. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and local time in the comments. Love seeing where you're all drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing just outside the wedding of Peleus and Thetis. It's awkward already. Everyone's here, gods, goddesses, probably a few drunk satyrs with instruments they don't know how to play. But guess who wasn't invited? Eris, goddess of discord. Yes, the literal personification of pettiness and group chat drama. She shows up anyway, uninvited, and instead of tossing a tantrum, she tosses a golden apple. It says, "To the fairest," which you'd think would be a compliment. Nope. Instant chaos. 3 goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, each claim it's meant for them. Zeus, being Zeus, refuses to get involved. He's already learned that refereeing divine beauty pageants is a lose-lose, so he punts the decision to a random mortal shepherd named Paris. Because obviously who better to judge immortal beauty than a guy herding goats? Paris doesn't do this alone, though. Each goddess offers a bribe. Hera promises power, Athena offers wisdom and battle skill, and Aphrodite? She promises him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris picks Aphrodite. Historians still argue whether this was Paris being romantic or just kind of basic. The problem is that woman, Helen, is already married. To a king. And that one apple ends up snowballing into the Trojan War because apparently nobody in this universe has ever heard of boundaries. So here's your mainstream fact. The myth of the golden apple is considered the earliest spark of the Trojan War cycle, immortalized in Homer's Iliad. But the quirky twist. Some lesser-known versions claim Eris didn't even throw the apple. She just rolled it in casually, like someone placing a prank gift under the Christmas tree. You walk through the orchard now, dodging low-hanging myth and bruised pride. Golden apples still dangle above you, shimmering in twilight, unclaimed and gleaming. One looks suspiciously fresh. You take a step closer. Just one. A branch creaks. No, thank you, you think. Let's not start another ancient war tonight. The path curves on, and behind you, you hear a low snort. Probably just a sleeping boar. Or Aphrodite practicing her glare in the reflection of a pond. Who knows? As you follow the soft crunch of your feet over fallen leaves, the orchard begins to thin. In the distance, there's the faint sound of wings flapping. Not bird wings, but swan wings. And for some reason, that sound feels loaded. But you keep walking. The stories are waiting. You move from the golden orchard into a misty lakeside meadow, where the moonlight glistens off the water like silver silk. The air is cool here, almost uncomfortably crisp, and you swear the geese are watching you. But that's not a goose gliding across the pond. It's a swan, a huge one. Graceful, yes, but also smug. You watch it glide closer, tilting its head ever so slightly like it knows things. Important things. Mythological things. And that's because it's not just a swan, it's Zeus. Again, this guy just cannot help himself. Tonight you meet Leda. She's a Spartan queen, known for her beauty and grace, and she's probably just trying to enjoy an ordinary walk by the lake when, bam! Here comes Zeus, descending from Olympus not as a regal god, but as a very determined waterfowl. You're standing beside Leda now, watching her look up. The swan flutters down in a dramatic spiral like he's auditioning for an avian ballet. It's weirdly elegant, suspiciously elegant. And while you're trying to figure out why a celestial being with lightning bolts would willingly turn into something that hisses at toddlers, you realize something. This isn't even that unusual for Greek mythology. You've got gods turning into bulls, eagles, golden rain, and later, spoiler, actual fire. A swan? Almost tame. Mainstream historians generally agree that this myth, bizarre as it sounds, had cultural significance in ancient Sparta and Athens. Leda's offspring include Helen of Troy and the twins Castor and Pollux, depending on the version you're hearing. Some say she laid eggs. Yes, eggs. You don't get to skip past that part. A queen. Laying eggs. After encountering a cosmic swan. And honestly, no one in the myth seems that weirded out about it. Here's your quirky tidbit. There's an ancient Roman statue of Leda and the swan that was so awkward to look at that Renaissance artists tried to fix it. Michelangelo even sketched a version where Leda just looks vaguely embarrassed, like she's posing with the world's worst birthday gift. Scholars still argue whether the myth was meant to be symbolic. Maybe it's about fertility or divine intervention or male egos disguised as birds. Or maybe, just maybe, Zeus liked the drama. After all, being king of the gods apparently wasn't enough. He had to do improv with feathers and webbed feet. You step closer to the pond. The swan pauses mid-paddle, giving you a look that's somewhere between majestic and deeply unsettling. Then it lifts its wings and takes off with a gust of air and a few elegant flaps that echo down the water's surface like ripples of myth itself. The meadow quiets. Leda's figure fades into the haze, and the eggs, yes, plural, glisten faintly beneath a low tree. You pretend not to notice them hatching because, honestly, this myth has already done enough. You continue walking, this time through a field that begins to darken as storm clouds gather, not overhead, but in the mood of the tale itself. The next figure you meet doesn't glide or sparkle. She moos. Because her myth? It starts with betrayal, ends in bovine misery, and features one of the strangest babysitters in all of mythology. But we'll get there soon. For now, you leave the meadow behind, with the sound of swan wings still flapping in your memory, and the faintest feeling that you've just witnessed one of Olympus's most eyebrow-raising transformations. The meadow gives way to marshland, where reeds whisper secrets and dragonflies dart like flickering thoughts. It smells like wet grass and damp stone, and somewhere in the distance there's a cow lowing. Not a herd, just one cow. Soft, lonely, persistent. You step carefully onto a narrow path flanked by puddles and strange flowers, and there, limping toward the moonlight, is Io. She doesn't start as a cow, of course. Io was once a priestess of Hera, loyal and luminous. One of those mortal women who somehow caught Zeus's roving divine attention, which, as you've learned, is almost never a good thing. This time, Zeus doesn't bother with feathers or golden showers. No elaborate theatrics. He just visits Io in secret, and Hera, his goddess wife with a very sharp memory and a sharper grudge, gets suspicious. When Zeus sees Hera approaching, he panics, and in true panicked man-in-trouble fashion, he turns Io into a cow. Yes, a cow. Just imagine the confusion. You're beside her now as she stumbles along, hooves awkward and tail twitching. Her eyes are still human, confused, terrified, and very, very done with everyone's nonsense. Hera, not fooled by this sudden cow grazing in the exact spot her husband was flirting, pretends to accept the story. She even compliments the cow. Then casually she says, "Can I keep her?" Zeus, trapped in his own ridiculous lie, agrees. Enter Argus, not the newspaper, not the catalog. Argus Panoptus, the guy with 100 eyes. Literally. Hera assigns him to watch Io so she doesn't wander off and become a human again behind the nearest bush. Io tries to escape, of course. She moos pitifully under the night sky, dreaming of her former life, her voice stolen. Some say she could still cry real tears. Others insist her mind remained fully human the entire time. Historians still argue whether Io's transformation was meant as punishment, protection, or just divine damage control. And Argus? He watches. Always. Half of his eyes are awake, the other half blinks slowly, then rotate shifts. It's terrifying if you think about it, and somehow even worse when you see it up close. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Io's myth helped explain the origin of certain Mediterranean place names, like the Ionian Sea, supposedly named after her wandering escape. And your quirky detail? Some ancient authors insisted that Argus's eyes were later placed in the feathers of a peacock, Hera's favorite bird. So, next time you see a peacock showing off, just remember, you're looking at a walking monument to divine surveillance. Eventually, Zeus sends Hermes, the original smooth-talking, wing-sandaled god, to fix things. Hermes plays a flute, tells a boring story, some say intentionally. And when Argus finally falls asleep with all 100 eyes, Hermes casually eliminates him. It's the quietest assassination in mythic history and somehow still feels polite. Io flees. She runs over mountains, through deserts, across continents. She's chased by a gadfly sent by Hera, a tiny buzzing tormentor that keeps her on the move. That buzz you hear now? It might just be the fly still following her across the centuries. You walk beside her as she trudges past, hooves splashing in mud, eyes filled with sorrow and something else. Endurance. She's part cow, part goddess-to-be, and fully trapped in someone else's mess. Later myths say she makes it all the way to Egypt, gives birth to a divine bloodline, and is worshipped as a moon goddess. But for now, she's just trying to get out of this marsh with her sanity intact. The buzzing fades, the reeds part. You leave the cow priestess behind and step into a new scene. Still high in drama, still dripping with Zeus-related nonsense. But this time, we're headed up, way up, to a mountaintop where a Trojan shepherd is about to get swept into a god's personal VIP lounge. Hope you're not afraid of heights. The marsh softens underfoot, the buzzing fades, and the moonlight sharpens into a silvery path that rises. You start climbing, slowly, steadily, until the ground beneath you becomes rocky, open, and windswept. Mount Ida, they called it, tucked in the hills above Troy. Somewhere between pasture and divine pickup spot. You're not alone. There's a boy here, maybe 16 or 17, standing barefoot in the grass. He's handsome, like unfairly so, and wears the casual boredom of someone used to watching sheep and not much else. His name is Ganymede. He's royalty, technically, a Trojan prince. But he spends most of his days herding livestock and minding his own business. Until Zeus notices him. From Olympus, the king of the gods glances down and thinks, well, that's aesthetically pleasing, and makes a plan. Not one that involves conversation or consent, naturally. No, this plan involves feathers. Again, you look up. There's a massive eagle circling overhead, majestic, ominous, unnecessarily extra. And before Ganymede can finish a sigh, the eagle swoops down, grabs him, and lifts him straight into the clouds. He doesn't even drop the shepherd's staff. You ascend too, drifting upward alongside them, past the clouds, toward a golden palace that glimmers against the dark. Ganymede's just floating there, somewhere between what just happened and do I still have to do chores? Up on Olympus, Zeus introduces him to the other gods, mostly by announcing that this mortal boy will now serve as cupbearer. That means he'll pour ambrosia for immortals for all eternity, which is either the weirdest internship in history or a deeply messed up fairy tale promotion. Mainstream scholars agree that Ganymede's story was a major part of Greek culture. His image appears on pottery, coins, even mosaics. He's often shown with an eagle or holding a jug. And for the ancient Greeks, the myth had cultural weight. It was used to explain divine favor, the nature of love, and sometimes, yes, relationships between older men and younger protégés. Here's your quirky tidbit. In one Athenian play, someone jokes that Zeus gave Ganymede a job just so he wouldn't flirt with Hera's handmaids anymore. So even the ancient comedians were raising their eyebrows. And here's where it gets scholarly weird. Historians still argue whether the myth of Ganymede was meant to be aspirational, allegorical, or just another example of the gods projecting their very mortal messiness. Was it love? Was it symbolism? Was it a celestial kidnapping with decent benefits? You drift now through the golden halls of Olympus. Ganymede walks quietly beside you, balancing a crystal jug. He looks resigned, a little confused but not unhappy. Some myths say he became immortal, others that he eventually grew wings. One version even has Zeus placing him in the sky as the constellation Aquarius, the water bearer. If you glance up tonight, you might see him, pouring starry liquid from a cosmic jug, still doing his job, still wondering how this all got started with one innocent afternoon on a hillside. As you pass by, Hebe, the former cupbearer, gives Ganymede a polite little wave and maybe a passive-aggressive smile. She didn't even get a promotion, just reassignment. Workplace drama is eternal, even among immortals. The wind shifts. You leave the palace behind, gliding gently downward towards something heavier, darker, and more metallic. This next story starts not in the sky, but underground, in a locked room where a father hides his daughter in a brass box, and somehow Zeus still finds a way to sneak in. And no, this time it's not an eagle, it's rain. You touch down with a faint metallic ring, like the echo of an old bell, and realize the air here feels different. Heavier? Still. You're underground now, surrounded by polished bronze walls that catch flickers of torchlight but refuse to give off warmth. It smells like old metal, incense, and a bit of desperation. In the center of this shining vault is a girl, young, delicate, and very, very bored. Her name is Danae, and her father, King Aquarius of Argos, has locked her in here. Why? Because of a prophecy. Naturally. He heard from the oracle at Delphi that his daughter's future son would one day kill him. Now, instead of just being a good dad, he does what all deeply paranoid Greek kings seem to do. He panics and makes wildly unethical parenting decisions. In this case, he seals his daughter in a bronze chamber to prevent her from ever seeing a man. Nice try. Zeus, watching from Olympus, sees Danae sitting in the gloom and decides, that's the one. But instead of showing up with his usual wings, fur, or animal trickery, he tries something new. He turns himself into a golden shower. Literal, shimmering particles of divine rain, dripping through the ceiling. Yes, Zeus, king of the gods, takes the form of precipitation. Honestly, historians still argue whether this was poetic symbolism, spiritual metaphor, or just a very weird loophole in the parental controls. You're standing in the corner of the vault now, watching as Danae looks up at the sparkling light that drifts down from the crack in the ceiling. It doesn't make sense, and she doesn't move. The gold drizzles over her hair, her lap, her skin, and somehow this gentle sparkle of divine rain results in pregnancy. Of course it does. 9 months later, Danae gives birth to Perseus. You've heard of him. Slayer of Medusa, rescuer of Andromeda, full-time hero, part-time Gorgon enthusiast. But right now, he's just a newborn in a vault, and his grandfather is furious. Aquarius, still unwilling to directly commit murder. Greek kings are oddly squeamish when it comes to killing their own kin, but totally okay with letting fate do it. Places Danae and baby Perseus in a wooden chest and tosses them into the sea. Casual infanticide, Greek myth style. Here's your mainstream fact. Danae's story was a common subject in Renaissance art. Her moment with the golden rain was considered both spiritual and sensual, a favorite among painters who like to play with themes of divine conception and sparkle lighting. Quirky detail, in some ancient plays, Danae is portrayed as fully aware that the rain is not just weather. She even speaks to it. There's a line in one old script where she sighs and says, "How gently you fall, and yet how heavy you leave me." Poetic. And also, wow, you walk past the bronze walls now and they shimmer slightly as if they remember what happened. The chamber is empty, but in the corner lies a single coin-sized droplet of gold. Still glowing. Still warm. You climb out of the underground vault and find yourself on a rocky shore. A battered wooden chest lies cracked open on the sand. Inside, Danae cradles her child, and both look toward the horizon, where the next wave is already coming in. You glance back one last time at the ceiling where the gold rain once fell. Somewhere above, Zeus is probably congratulating himself. Again. Ahead, the wind shifts to something saltier, sharper, and scented with bronze and brine. The ocean is calling. So is Crete. Because the next story, it involves a bull, but not the usual farm kind. This bull is majestic, sacred, and the beginning of one of the strangest family trees in myth. Waves crash softly now, not violently, more like a lullaby for the coastline. You follow the tide toward the island of Crete, where the sun bakes the stone white and olive trees bend in the sea breeze. It smells like rosemary, salt, and warm dust. And here we meet Pasiphae, queen of Crete, wife of King Minos, and, well, soon to become the unwitting star of one of Greek mythology's most surreal episodes. You sit beside her in a shaded portico, sipping imaginary wine as she stares longingly out at the sea. See, her husband, King Minos, once made a deal with Poseidon. The sea god sent a magnificent white bull rising straight out of the ocean as a sign of divine favor. The bull was supposed to be sacrificed in Poseidon's honor. But Minos, being the kind of guy who thinks rules are more like suggestions, decides, nope, this bull is too perfect, and keeps it for himself. Poseidon is not amused. He decides that if Minos won't sacrifice the bull, then maybe someone else will appreciate it. So he curses Pasiphae, not with illness, not with exile, with lust, specifically an overwhelming, inescapable desire for that sacred bull. Yeah, you probably won't survive this. Pasiphae, smart and desperate, goes to Daedalus. Yes, the very same Daedalus who will later build wings and get tangled in Icarus's whole situation. Right now, though, he's just a wildly skilled inventor who never asks follow-up questions. She asks him to build her a wooden cow. Hollow, lifelike, fitted with wheels. You know, for reasons. And Daedalus builds it. Of course he does. This part of the myth is where things shift from absurd to genuinely uncomfortable. But you don't need to imagine the details. Just know that Pasiphae climbs inside. And the sacred bull, convinced its love at first moo, does the rest. Sometime later, she gives birth to a child. Not fully human, not fully beast. The Minotaur. You spot him now, just a shadow at the edge of the trees. His head is that of a bull, his body broad and vaguely human, his breath loud and labored. He looks lonely, confused, angry in the way that abandoned things often are. Historians still argue whether the story of Pasiphae is meant to punish female desire, warn about divine meddling, or symbolize something deeper. Perhaps the blending of older Minoan bull-worshipping traditions with newer Greek myth-making. Your mainstream fact? The bull was likely inspired by real Cretan religious rituals. Archaeologists have found frescoes of bull leaping, and some believe the Minotaur myth echoes older fertility cults tied to sacred animals and labyrinths. Here's your fringe tidbit. There's a lost play, fragmented but tantalizing, where Pasiphae defends her actions in poetic monologue, arguing that the gods poured madness into her veins like hot milk. That phrase, hot milk madness, shows up in a few other obscure sources. Nobody really knows what it means, but it's haunting, right? King Minos, upon discovering the result of all this divine drama, doesn't exactly embrace his new stepson. Instead, he commissions Daedalus to build an elaborate labyrinth, a twisting, endless maze to imprison the Minotaur deep beneath the palace. And so, beneath the gorgeous courtyards of Knossos, a living creature paces in the dark, trapped not by his own sins but by the choices of gods and kings. You follow the sound of his footsteps now, slow, echoing, heavy. The stone walls rise around you. You're in the labyrinth. No exit signs. Just echoes. And this isn't even the end of the Minotaur's story. That comes later with Theseus and string and complicated promises. But for now, as the footsteps fade, so does the maze. The stones dissolve into smoke and the sun brightens again. You're rising now, leaving behind the island of Crete, the queen who was cursed and the child who became a monster. Because where we're headed next, it's a cliffside, a drop, a shimmering storm cloud overhead. Zeus is at it again. You hover above a jagged coastline now, where cliffs slice into the Aegean Sea like stone knives, and wind howls like an old myth trying to be remembered. Somewhere below, waves slam against rocks that have seen too many tragedies. You drift downward and land softly beside a woman sitting on a ledge. Her name is Semele, and she's beautiful in that mortal meets cosmic trouble kind of way. She's a Theban princess, daughter of King Cadmus and Queen Harmonia, and right now she's very, very pregnant, which wouldn't be unusual except for who the father is. Take a wild guess. Zeus, naturally, and unlike the other stories, this one actually involves conversation. For a while, Semele and Zeus share a kind of strange intimacy. He visits her often, in secret of course, wrapped in human form and charming nonsense. He whispers promises. He brings thunder in his smile but not in his hands. And Semele believes him. Why wouldn't she? But the Queen of Olympus isn't one to let things slide. Hera, eternally furious and cosmically patient, starts plotting. She doesn't confront Zeus directly, no, she goes for the long game. She shapeshifts into an old woman, a nursemaid perhaps, and slips into Semele's confidence like fog under a door. You know, Hera says in her gentle disguise, it's strange, isn't it, that your lover claims to be Zeus, and yet he never shows you his true form? Almost as if he's hiding something. Semele hesitates. The thought plants itself in her mind like ivy. It curls around her curiosity and squeezes. So the next time Zeus visits, Semele looks up at him with wide, anxious eyes and says, if you really love me, if you're truly who you say, then show me. Show me your full divine form. Zeus freezes. He begs her to take it back. He reminds her gently that mortals can't handle divine revelation, that it's not romantic, it's terminal. But Semele insists. So Zeus keeps his word. He sheds his disguise, and in that instant, the entire world ignites. Light pours from him like a star exploding from the inside out. Fire, lightning, cosmic noise. You throw your arms over your eyes, but it doesn't help. The very atoms in the air tremble. Semele burns, instantly, tragically. But in the charred remnants of the palace, there's movement. Zeus steps into the smoke, pulls the unborn baby from her dying body, and does what no myth has prepared you for. He sews the child into his own thigh. Yes, thigh, not metaphor. Literal. For months, the god of thunder walks around with a fetus tucked into his leg, like the weirdest divine cargo pocket in history. And when the time comes, he opens his skin, and out comes Dionysus. You've probably heard of him. God of wine, revelry, chaos, theater, and really bad decisions with surprisingly great dance playlists. Mainstream historians note that Dionysus is a rare case, a god born twice. First from a mortal mother, and then reborn from Zeus himself. This duality made him unique, both Olympian and outsider, divine and dangerously human adjacent. Here's your fringe fact. In some versions, Semele is later deified by Zeus, renamed Thyone, and welcomed into Olympus. But only after Dionysus descends into the underworld and brings her back. It's one of the rare stories in Greek myth where a mortal not only returns from the dead, but gets promoted. And here's the scholarly mystery. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was originally a foreign import, maybe from Thrace or Phrygia, or a native Greek deity whose cult just felt too wild for early society. His rituals were ecstatic, sometimes unhinged, and his followers, mainly women called manads, were known to enter trance-like states and tear animals apart with their hands. Dionysus the Stormborn would become a god of contradictions, madness and ecstasy, grief and celebration. He's laughter echoing at a funeral and tears spilled in a comedy club. But right now, he's just a baby, soft, warm, and blinking up at a thundercloud of a father. Zeus holds him in the wind, unsure for once what to do next. You drift back, passing over scorched earth and the faintest scent of ash and myrrh. Behind you, the cliffs whisper of what happens when gods reveal too much. Ahead, a different shape is forming. Part bird, part woman, entirely unnerving. Because now it's time to meet Leda, and that's a whole new kind of weird. There's a ripple in the air now, as if the sky itself is holding its breath. You drift over a pale blue lake surrounded by reeds where swans glide silently, their white feathers too perfect to be real. Everything here is soft, the colors, the water, the light. But beneath it all hums that quiet, unspoken sense that something deeply bizarre is about to happen. And it is. You float closer to the shoreline, where a woman in a flowing robe walks alone, brushing her fingers along the tops of the reeds. Her name is Leda, Queen of Sparta, known for her grace, wisdom, and, soon, her very strange place in mythology's maternity ward. She's alone for a moment, and that's all it takes. Above, the sky darkens, not with storm, but with feathers. Down swoops a swan, large, beautiful, and unnaturally elegant. Its wings curve like painted silk, its neck long and graceful, its eyes just a little too knowing. Because of course it's Zeus. You sigh. Yes. Again. The king of Olympus has decided to become a swan this time. And no, we're not given a clear reason. Maybe he thought the disguise would be charming. Maybe he'd exhausted his other options. Maybe he just really liked birds that day. Historians still argue whether the story of Leda and the swan is metaphorical, allegorical, or simply the ancient Greek equivalent of a soap opera plotline that spiraled way out of control. The details vary depending on the version, but they all agree on one thing. Leda and the swan come together in a moment that's mysterious, symbolic, and deeply ambiguous. Some accounts say Zeus seduces her, others claim trickery, and still others lean toward outright assault, wrapped in poetic language. The ancient poets didn't agree either. Even within a single generation, this myth shifted dramatically in tone. And in modern discussions, it's become a lightning rod for how we interpret consent in mythology and how ancient cultures process divine encounters through murky, shifting morality. You step back now, away from the reeds where a strange silence has fallen. Soon after the encounter, Leda lays 2 eggs. Yes, eggs, like a bird. And from them hatch 4 children: Helen, Clytemnestra, Castor, and Pollux. 2 boys, 2 girls. 2 mortal, 2 divine. Nobody agrees which ones are which. And that's part of the myth's charm and confusion. Helen, of course, is the famous one. The future face that launched 1,000 ships. The spark of the Trojan War. The woman who will become an icon of love, loss, and bad judgment. But for now, she's just a newborn from an egg. Here's your mainstream fact. In classical sculpture and Renaissance painting, the Leda and the swan myth was a favorite, often depicted sensually, dramatically, and with an unnerving level of detail regarding the swan's posture. Artists loved the surreal, otherworldly moment it offered. Fringe tidbit? In some versions, the swan isn't alone. Nemesis, the goddess of retribution, is involved somehow. One variant claims she was the one Zeus originally pursued, and when she turned into a goose to escape, he became a swan to chase her. And then Leda finds that egg. Myth logic, folks. Absolutely bananas. As for Castor and Pollux, they'll become famous later as the Gemini twins. Immortalized in the stars, sometimes taking turns in the underworld, always linked in brotherhood. Clytemnestra? She's destined for tragedy. She'll marry Agamemnon and become one of the most complex, vengeful women in Greek drama. But right now, none of that has happened. Right now, 4 infants have just emerged from 2 glowing eggs, and Leda is holding them as gently as if they were made of light. The swan is long gone, just a single feather drifting in the breeze. You pick it up. It's warm, unnaturally so. It hums in your fingers like it remembers everything. And now the wind shifts again. Cooler this time, more deliberate. You feel pulled toward a distant mountain trail, one that winds toward a girl in a simple dress, carrying water, humming to herself. Her name is Europa, and she's about to go for a ride she didn't ask for. You follow a warm breeze through the haze of early morning, past olive groves and fig trees, down to a quiet shoreline where the air smells like salt and citrus. There she is, Europa. She hums as she gathers wildflowers in her basket, her bare feet brushing the grass, her dress catching the sunlight like a sail. You'd think you were watching a peaceful painting come to life. And then, hooves. A bull steps out from the trees. Not a terrifying, snorting, red-eyed bull. No, this one is gentle, white as polished marble with eyes soft and intelligent, and just enough swagger in its step to make you suspicious. Yep. Zeus again. At this point, you might be wondering, does he even have one normal hobby? Apparently not. He's traded his lightning bolts and regal form for this. Cloven hooves, a twitching tail, and a plan that involves neither consent nor common sense. Europa, unaware, is charmed. The bull nuzzles her hand, lies down beside her. Eventually, she climbs onto his back, because that's what you do when a glowing god bull lounges beside you in a meadow and looks at you like a golden retriever. And then he runs. Not a gentle trot either, a sprint. Straight toward the water. You watch her eyes widen as hooves splash into foam, as waves rise around them. She clutches the bull's back, too stunned to scream. Her basket floats away. Flowers scatter, and the bull dives, yes, dives, into the Aegean, swimming faster than any ship, cutting through the sea like a myth in motion. Eventually, they land on the island of Crete. Sound familiar? Zeus, in one of his more theatrical exits, sheds his bull form and reveals himself. And for reasons known only to the stars, Europa doesn't run. Instead, she becomes queen of the island. 3 sons will be born from their union, including Minos, the very same king who would later imprison the Minotaur in that maze you remember. Callback, so see how the weird circles close? Mainstream historical fact time. The myth of Europa was so influential that her name became the root for an entire continent. Europe derives from Europa, symbolizing both the woman and, metaphorically, the westward expansion of Greek cultural identity. She's more than a myth. She's a geographical concept now. Here's your fringe fact. Ancient coins from Crete show Europa riding a bull, and some scholars believe this image represents an older fertility goddess being merged with newer Olympian narratives. In other words, Zeus may have hijacked not just Europa's afternoon, but her entire mythological lineage. As for the scholarly debate, historians still argue whether this tale is a metaphor for Phoenician trade routes. Europa was originally said to be from Tyre in modern-day Lebanon, or a coded retelling of political abduction. Was Europa's journey westward symbolic of cultural migration, or something more sinister, softened by centuries of storytelling? You stand now on the beach of Crete, watching Europa walk inland toward her new life. She pauses once to look back at the sea, her expression unreadable. Regret? Acceptance? Or just the calm of someone who knows she's now part of something vast and inexplicable? You follow her gaze toward the water, and there, shimmering just beneath the surface, is something massive. A shape twisting beneath the waves. A god of the sea? A cursed king? Number. It's a boy. A mortal boy. Hair tangled in salt, arms flailing. You're about to witness the strange tale of Ganymede, the cupbearer of Olympus. And yes, Zeus again. You rise again, this time into the cool winds over Mount Ida, where clouds cling to the peaks like spilled milk, and everything feels a little closer to Olympus. Below, running along the slopes, is a boy with sun-kissed skin and a shepherd's crook. His name is Ganymede, and for now he's just minding his business, herding sheep and humming to himself with a carefree rhythm of someone who doesn't know a thunder god has noticed him. Ganymede is beautiful. That's what every version of the myth emphasizes. Not strong, not wise, just beautiful. So beautiful, in fact, that even the gods stop what they're doing to take a look, especially one in particular. Guess who? Zeus, yes, again. Like a celestial talent scout who cannot stop himself from recruiting mortals into divine chaos. Now, most stories give him two options here. Turn into something or send something. This time, he sends. Specifically, a giant golden eagle. Regal, silent, on a mission. You watch it descend, talons stretched wide, wings blotting out the sun. Ganymede doesn't even have time to drop his crook. The eagle grabs him, lifts him skyward, and off they go, up, 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 into the realm of gods. There's no falling here, no panic. Just wind, silence, and the fading cries of sheep far below. Next thing he knows, Ganymede is on Olympus. Just there. No royal welcome, no orientation. One moment he's a shepherd boy, the next he's pouring ambrosia at immortal dinner parties. Welcome to your new job, cupbearer to the gods. What a promotion. But not everyone's thrilled. Hera, predictably, is furious. Not just at Zeus's latest abduction, but at the way Ganymede seems to have replaced her daughter Hebe, the original cupbearer. You can almost hear her pacing, fuming, muttering something about winged perverts and goat cheese under her breath. Still, Zeus is unapologetic. In some versions, he gives Ganymede eternal youth and a constellation as compensation. Aquarius, the water-bearer, still visible in the night sky. So if you've ever looked up and spotted a faint arc of stars pouring out like a jug, that's him. A kidnapped shepherd, frozen forever in mythic servitude. Here's your mainstream historical note. Ganymede became a powerful symbol in classical antiquity, particularly in Athenian society, where he was cited in the context of pederasty, the culturally complex relationships between older men and younger boys. But Ganymede's story transcended that, evolving into broader themes of beauty, loss, and divine favor, or exploitation, depending on your read. And your fringe tidbit? In some versions, Ganymede never quite adjusts to Olympus. They say he weeps often, homesick for Mount Ida and the sheep he once cared for. Zeus, unable to undo what he's done, allows his tears to fall to earth as rain, a tragic origin story for storms and longing. And here comes the debate. Historians still argue whether Ganymede was a mortal exalted, or a symbol of how gods used humans like toys. Was he honored or trapped? Immortalized or erased? No one quite agrees. But you watch him now, walking slowly along the marble halls of Olympus, a golden pitcher in hand. The gods talk around him, not to him. He pours for Apollo, for Hermes, for Artemis. No one meets his eyes. And in a quiet corner of the sky, that eagle circles again. Silent, watching. Always watching. You begin to drift, the clouds curling around you. Olympus fading behind. Below, a forest thickens. Wild, green, unruly. A girl runs through it, laughing. Zeus is not far behind. But this time, things won't go his way. Because that girl is Callisto. And Hera has been preparing. Through rustling trees and the scent of pine, you drift down into a wilderness untouched by roads or reason. The forest here feels ancient, untamed, wild, almost like it knows your footsteps before you make them. Somewhere beneath the canopy, a girl runs, sure-footed and swift, her bow slung over one shoulder, her face lit with that confident, feral spark of someone who's never been caught. This is Callisto, a nymph of Artemis. which by itself already means she's taken a vow: chastity, loyalty, and wilderness forever. No husbands, no distractions, definitely no gods with eagle problems. But Zeus, of course, doesn't care much for vows. He's been watching Callisto. Maybe it's her grace. Maybe it's that defiant independence. Maybe it's just that she said no, and to him, that's interesting. So he waits, studies, and then when the moment comes, when Callisto wanders away from Artemis's band of huntresses, when she's alone in a clearing, Zeus transforms. Not into a bull, not into a shower of gold. This time, he becomes Artemis. Same voice, same silver eyes, same stance. He steps out of the trees, pretending to adjust a quiver, and Callisto turns with a smile. She lets her guard down. And that's when it happens. Details vary here, and ancient sources don't all agree on how this encounter plays out. But whatever version you read, the result is the same. Callisto is deceived, betrayed, and eventually she becomes pregnant. She tries to hide it, but in the realm of goddesses, secrets don't stay buried for long. One day, while bathing with the other nymphs, her condition is revealed. And Artemis, fierce, proud, betrayed, banishes her on the spot. There's no room for broken vows, even if the vow was stolen from her. Now here's your mainstream fact. Callisto's tale appears in Ovid's Metamorphoses, where it takes a tragic turn. After her son is born, Arcas, Callisto is transformed into a bear, cursed to roam the forest that once gave her freedom. Fringe tidbit? In some lesser-known versions, it's not Zeus who turns her into a bear at all. It's Hera, still boiling with jealousy. Not just because of Zeus's actions, but because another child walks the world, born of infidelity and silence. Historians still argue whether the bear transformation was meant as punishment or protection. Was Callisto hidden from Hera's wrath, or marked by it? Some say Zeus did it to disguise her. Others say Hera cursed her out of spite. But the ending never changes. Years later, Arcas grows up, strong, curious, unaware of his mother's fate. One day while hunting, he encounters a massive bear. She rears up, he draws his spear, and in that frozen moment as the stars hold their breath, Zeus intervenes. To prevent a tragedy, he sweeps them both into the sky. Callisto becomes Ursa Major, the Great Bear, and Arcas nearby becomes Ursa Minor. Two constellations forever circling the North Star, never setting, always visible in the night sky. They call it poetic. You might call it convenient, a way to end a tragic tale with glitter and distance. But you watch them now, those stars. So steady, so patient. Do they remember the forest? Do they miss the trees? You move on, letting the heavens swirl above you. Below, the air thickens with dust and forge smoke. Metal clangs, fire dances, and somewhere in the gloom, a god works at his anvil. Barefoot, soot-faced, muttering about family drama and his extremely questionable marriage. He's Hephaestus, and he's about to become the most unintentionally entertaining part of this celestial soap opera. You descend into a place that feels more like a mechanic's garage than a palace. Hot, loud, metallic. Sparks fly, hammers strike, chains clink and groan. This is the forge of Hephaestus, the god of fire, metalworking, and being the most overlooked Olympian in a family that loves drama like it's an Olympic sport. He's limping, as always, his legs twisted since birth. Some say Hera threw him off Olympus because she was ashamed of his appearance. Others say Zeus did it after Hephaestus dared to step between his parents in one of their, let's call them, heated debates. Either way, the guy fell from the heavens, landed hard, and still managed to become the divine blacksmith. So, yeah, he's got layers. Today, he's hammering out something suspiciously throne-shaped. Here's the setup. Hephaestus doesn't exactly get invited to family parties, so he sends Hera a gift, a golden throne, exquisitely crafted, gleaming with impossible artistry. She loves it. sits down immediately, which is when the trap springs. Invisible chains snap around her wrists and ankles. The throne locks tight. She can't move. She's stuck. The Queen of Olympus, snared by her own son's craftsmanship. You can almost hear Zeus sigh from across the mountain. The gods gather, try to free her. They push, pull, threaten, plead. But only Hephaestus knows the mechanism, and he's not coming back. This is where things get weird. Dionysus, the party god, wine-drunk peacemaker, takes it upon himself to solve the problem. He tracks down Hephaestus in his volcanic lair and does the only logical thing. Gets him drunk. Properly drunk. Slurring, laughing, arms over shoulder drunk. And then he coaxes him back up the mountain. You watch Hephaestus stumble into Olympus, giggling, soot-streaked, with Dionysus half carrying him and the gods cheering like someone just returned with a pizza. Hephaestus releases Hera. The throne clicks open. She rises, furious but free. And in return for his cooperation, the gods offer Hephaestus a reward: marriage. Now, if you're thinking they'll pair him with someone gentle and understanding, maybe another overlooked deity, think again. They marry him to Aphrodite? Yes, that Aphrodite. Goddess of beauty, desire, and every chaotic romantic subplot from here to Troy. Let's just say it doesn't go well. Mainstream historical fact. In classical Athens, Hephaestus was a symbol of hard labor, skill, and perseverance. Proof that strength didn't always wear a symmetrical face. His myths offered comfort to craftsmen and disabled citizens alike. Fringe tidbit? Some stories claim that Hephaestus crafted automatons, golden maidens with mechanical minds, to help him around the forge. Literal robot assistants, ancient Greek steampunk. As for the scholarly debate, historians still argue whether his marriage to Aphrodite was a political allegory, beauty bound to industry, or simply comedic contrast for the myths. Was it meant to elevate Hephaestus and or humiliate him? You peer now into their shared quarters. Hephaestus hammering out gifts for the gods while Aphrodite slips away, barefoot, radiant, and already looking over her shoulder for someone else. Someone taller. Someone with abs like a Doric column and a jawline sculpted by war. Ares. Yep. God of war. Aphrodite's secret lover. Zeus's least subtle son. And he's about to walk straight into one of the most awkward traps in mythological history, because Hephaestus may limp, but he's not stupid. He knows. And he's building something. You follow the soft rattle of chains, the scent of iron and jealousy. This is going to get very, very uncomfortable. The room you enter next isn't one of marble and glory, but satin and secrets. Aphrodite's chambers, nestled high on Mount Olympus, always smell faintly of roses, sea foam, and poor decisions. You arrive just in time to catch the tail end of a glance. Hers over her shoulder and Ares ducking inside with the confidence of a man who thinks he'll never get caught. Spoiler. He will. Now, Hephaestus may be awkward, but he's also the god of precision. And when your wife is Aphrodite and her idea of fidelity is more flexible than a dolphin in a yoga class, you start preparing. Meticulously. So he crafts a trap. Not with ropes, not with guards, but with a net. A magical, invisible, impossibly fine mesh of unbreakable bronze that springs the moment Aphrodite and Ares slip beneath the covers. 1 second they're tangled in divine passion, and the next, snared, suspended, mid-act. Not exactly how they imagined the morning going, and then Hephaestus invites everyone to come take a look. Yes, all the gods. A whole pantheon's worth of divine voyeurs, crowding into the bedroom, pointing, snickering, whispering jokes you probably wouldn't tell in front of your grandmother. Even Poseidon shows up, eyebrows raised like twin tidal waves. This might be ancient myth's earliest recorded roast. Mainstream historical fact. This scene, known from Homer's Odyssey, wasn't just a comedy. In many Athenian symposiums, those fancy dinner-drinking parties, It was reenacted as a kind of burlesque cautionary tale. Art and pottery often depicted it with exaggerated expressions and limbs askew. Picture high drama soap opera meets frat house skit. Fringe tidbit? Some variations say the net wasn't just invisible but cold, like ice cold, which adds a rather unfortunate detail to Ares' already shrinking dignity. Now here's your scholarly debate moment. Historians still argue whether this myth was meant to shame Aphrodite and Ares, or to mock the idea of marital institutions entirely. Some read it as an early critique of forced pairings, while others say it's just pure schadenfreude with a side of mythic slapstick. Eventually, Hephaestus agrees to let them go, but only after Poseidon vouches that Ares will pay a fine. Spoiler, he probably won't. The lovers slink off, exposed and humiliated, while the rest of Olympus buzzes with gossip for the next few millennia. You watch Hephaestus return to his forge, wiping his hands, strangely calm. He doesn't smile, doesn't gloat, just starts hammering again. He's always building, always repairing what others break. And Aphrodite? Well, she's not done stirring trouble. She leaves behind a golden apple, a gift, a trap, a silent bomb that won't go off for years. But when it does, it'll burn cities. You follow the apple now, rolling slowly, gleaming, inscribed with 3 simple words: to the fairest. It rolls across a banquet table between 3 goddesses, and as they reach for it, history shifts, because we're heading next into one of the most famous messes in Greek mythology. The kind that launches 1,000 ships. You land softly on the sand of an island party gone wildly out of control. Wreaths of ivy, platters of olives, harp music tangled with divine giggles. It's the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, a mortal man and a sea nymph, and almost every god and goddess is here. Everyone, that is, except Eris, goddess of discord. She wasn't invited, for obvious reasons. Now, most people would take the hint and sulk in silence. But Eris, she does what any self-respecting chaos goddess would do. She crashes the wedding and casually lobs a golden apple into the crowd. It spins in the air, sparkling like mischief itself. Engraved on its side are 3 words: to the fairest. And in a single breath, the party dies. 3 goddesses step forward: Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, and the bickering begins. You feel it like static in the air. Power crackles. Smiles twitch into threats. Zeus, wise enough to avoid that particular minefield, punts the decision. He sends them down to a mortal shepherd on Mount Ida, Paris of Troy. Handsome, naive, and destined to make history's worst beauty pageant choice. Paris sits in the sun, probably just trying to get a tan and mind his sheep. And suddenly, 3 goddesses are standing in front of him, demanding he judge which of them is the fairest. No pressure. Each offers him a bribe. Hera promises power, rulership over all of Asia. Athena offers wisdom and victory in battle. Aphrodite offers love, specifically the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Guess which one Paris picks? Yep, Aphrodite. And thus begins the world's most catastrophic crush. Because that beautiful woman, she's Helen, of Sparta, as in already married, to a king, with an army. Mainstream historical fact? The Judgment of Paris was a foundational myth used in countless Greek artworks, from pottery to frescoes. It served as a symbolic origin for the Trojan War, a kind of divine prequel to 10 years of bloodshed and wooden horses. Fringe tidbit? Some sources claim Paris was already leaning toward Aphrodite before she even spoke, because of her reputation. Basically, he was starstruck. Divine fangirl behavior. And historians still argue whether this tale was ever truly meant as a cause for war, or simply a moral play on how even petty choices can spiral into catastrophe. Was Paris just a pawn in the gods' drama? Or did he genuinely seal Troy's fate with one badly timed yes? You now follow Paris as he sails to Sparta, hides behind false hospitality, and eventually flees with Helen, willingly or not, depending on which version you read. The moment she steps onto that Trojan ship, 1,000 fates snap into place like loaded dice. You hear the roar of Spartan oaths, the clash of bronze, the long war drums beginning to beat in the distance. But before the siege, before the blood, before Achilles stomps around with his dramatic sandal tantrums, you pause here, at the edge of myth where pride and love and manipulation swirl like storm clouds. All because of one apple and a shepherd who couldn't say no. Ooh. And now you stand on a quiet plain under a sky that remembers everything. The winds here smell like dust and smoke, the kind that clings to spears and old regrets. The Trojan War looms ahead. Not the clang of battle yet, but the aching buildup, the divine manipulation, the steady tightening of fate. Because once Helen is in Troy, there's no going back. The Greek kings, bound by oath, bruised egos and all, rally their armies. 1,000 ships launch. The sea churns with sails, and Olympus leans in, popcorn in hand, ready to meddle. You'd think gods would be above playing favorites in a mortal war. They are not. On the Greek side, Hera still fuming about Paris's beauty pageant verdict, Athena, ever the tactician, and Poseidon, who honestly just seems to enjoy smashing things. On the Trojan side, Aphrodite, obviously, and Ares because wherever love leads him, war is sure to follow. Even Artemis gets tangled in this mess, siding with the Trojans out of pure divine sibling rivalry. Zeus tries to stay neutral at first. Classic Zeus move. Pretend you're above it all while secretly nudging pawns around the board when no one's watching. So many stories bloom from this war. Achilles sulking in his tent over a stolen slave girl. Patroclus donning his armor and dying for it. Hector, noble and doomed, facing fate with quiet pride. And through it all, Helen, more symbol than woman now, walks the palace halls, weighed down by every choice made in her name. Mainstream historical fact. The city of Troy was indeed real. Excavated in modern-day Turkey, layers of ruins reveal a thriving Bronze Age settlement, likely destroyed multiple times. One layer, Troy 7A, bears signs of siege, possibly the kernel of truth behind Homer's tale. Fringe tidbit? In one strange version, Helen never even made it to Troy. A phantom Helen, crafted from clouds by Hera, was sent instead, while the real Helen was spirited away to Egypt. It's like ancient fan fiction, but with divine body doubles. Historians still argue whether the war was fought over love or land. Was it truly Helen? Or just a convenient excuse for a trade war in the Aegean? Either way, the poets stuck with the apple in the face that launched the ships, because it sounded better. But here's the thing. The story doesn't end with the fall of Troy, not really. The wooden horse, the flames, the fleeing survivors, those are chapters you know. Odysseus sails home, gets sidetracked for 10 years, and tells us all about it. But the deeper truth is this. None of it needed to happen. Not the war, not the judgment, not the apple. All it took was one god turning into a bird, a bull, a beam of light. One reckless desire cascading outward. You wander now through the quiet ruins. The war is over. The gods have turned away. The myths unravel like old rope. And so it's time to let the tale go. To soften your breathing, slow your mind, and drift gently toward stillness. The sky above you now has dimmed to indigo. The stars hang steady and slow, as if they too are winding down after eons of being watched and named and mythologized. You lie in soft grass, the scent of old stories clinging faintly in the air, warm bronze, olive oil, and the ghost of laughter from Olympus. You don't have to chase the plot anymore. No battles left to follow, no gods left to placate. All the bulls and birds and golden showers have quieted, and in that silence your limbs grow heavier, your breath deeper. The firelight flickers one last time in your mind's eye, gentle, not wild, and fades to a warm, sleepy glow. Let the noise of the gods slip away. Let the stories pause their spinning. Tonight, no one turns into anything. No apples roll, no thrones bind. There is just the night and your body tucked beneath its quiet weight. Let yourself drift like a feather from Hera's peacock or a petal from Aphrodite's rose. Let the softness take over. There's nothing left to decide. No fairness to judge, no storms to outrun. Just rest, just stars. And maybe, if you dream gently enough, you'll see Callisto and her sun still circling the sky, never setting, always shining, forever safe. Good night.